In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, March 11th, here in South Korea. The government is dispatching 20 military doctors and 138 public health doctors to 20 hospitals for 4 weeks starting today to minimize disruptions to essential care amid the prolonged walkout by doctors in training. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol reaffirms his pledge to transform Korea's Gangwon State into a leading digital and bio-innovation center during the 19th policy briefing open to the public earlier this morning. Over in Hollywood, big screen production Oppenheimer dominates this year's Academy Awards with 7 trophies in major categories, much to the delight of fans worldwide. We start with the measures in motion to minimize disruptions to essential healthcare at hospitals amid the prolonged absence of doctors in training. Our Kim Jong-sil has the latest.
The massive collective walkout by trainee doctors has now entered its 4th week. On Sunday, Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong announced plans to maintain the number of doctors amid the health service disruption.
We will also ensure the emergency care system is fully operational. We will dispatch 20 military doctors and 138 public health doctors to 20 hospitals for 4 weeks starting March 11th.
He added the government will swiftly use the nearly 130 billion won of reserves, roughly $100 million decided last week. The reserves are to support emergency on-call labor costs for medical personnel and help hospitals recruit medical staff during this time. The government also will increase compensation for doctors in essential medical care fields. This is because general practitioners are paid less due to the country's health insurance system, where fees for essential medical care are often set too low, according to the doctors. Regarding the government pilot project that began last month to give nurses the authority to practice partial medical procedures, the minister disagreed that it created the risk of illegal medical services.
The pilot project is intended to protect the public health while clarifying the scope of work so that nurses can focus on protecting patients without worrying about other things.
Meanwhile, professors of Seoul National University College of Medicine, the country's top medical school, will hold an emergency meeting later on Monday. The professors will likely discuss the current situation and come up with ideas on whether to engage in a collective resignation. South Korea has one of the lowest doctor-to-patient ratios in the OECD, with specialist doctors such as plastic surgeons and dermatologists some of the highest paid. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has reaffirmed his pledge to transform Korea's Gangwon State into a leading digital and bio-innovation center. Intentions to this end were shared during the 19th government policy briefing open to the public earlier on this Monday. The government will reportedly aim for an early completion of the so-called 333 project in Gangwon, which includes 30,000 jobs, 3,000 companies and a 300% sales growth in the digital sector. President also spoke of a Gangwon hydrothermal energy cluster in Chuncheon City, using water from the Soyanggang River to cool data centers and then reusing the heated water at neighboring smart farms. What's more, a corporate innovation park is also in the cards in Chuncheon City, as well as an injection of some $179 million for a strategic biocenter in the province. In other news, a growing number of big-name food and beverage companies are seeking to embrace the popularity of K-pop into their marketing strategies. And the latest such campaign by Coca-Cola is making some great waves. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin has more.
Ever tasted Hallyu, or the Korean wave? Well, now you can, thanks to Coca-Cola's latest limited edition drink, the Coca-Cola Zero Sugar K-Wave. Drawing inspiration from K-pop, the company says its flavor will help consumers relive what it calls the excitement they felt when they first became a K-pop fan.
I can feel that big companies are definitely paying a lot of attention to the Korean market and the K-pop scene and how much their influence has risen.
What also stands out is the brand's logo in Korean at the center of the can. For the first time in its century-long history, Coca-Cola has incorporated another language into its logo. Why is this?
The growing global fascination with Korean content and artists has reshaped how we see the Korean writing system, turning it into a sought-after design element. In the past, using Korean was a challenge for global brands due to its uniqueness. However, as Korean became more familiar, the language now strikes a perfect balance between distinctive charm and universal appeal.
And Coca-Cola is not the only one to incorporate Korean in its logos and packaging. This Korean food company previously had an English-only logo, but introduced Korean into its branding this year. Another trend observed at the K-Wave Coke is the rise of K-pop stars as models for food and beverage brands. Coca-Cola's K-Wave's launch campaign featured groups Stray Kids, ITZY, and NMIX. McDonald's recently collaborated with New Jeans, and Daesang Group's kimchi brand 종가 partnered with the 17-member Hoshi.
I think after the success of BTS, K-pop fans started to want to know more about their artists' cultural backgrounds, like what they buy or eat, not just their songs. Brands are capitalizing on this curiosity, selecting K-pop artists to represent their products globally, so that they can connect with a broader audience.
As K-content continues to attract overseas consumers and the market expands, expect to see more Korean language and artists taking the spotlight. 송유진, Arirang News.
And riding high on the wave of K-content popularity, Korea is seeing a greater proportion of young foreign travelers to the country, lured by K-sights, sounds, and tastes. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest numbers.
From K-pop idols BTS and Blackpink to Korea's Oscar-winning Parasite and Netflix smash hit series Squid Game, and even tteokbokki and kimbap. The growing love for Korea's music, entertainment, food, and culture have led to a huge increase in the flow of younger tourists coming into the country. According to the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute on Monday, a survey conducted on 4,000 foreign travelers who visited South Korea between October and December last year showed that over 31% became interested in traveling to the country after encountering Korean wave content. And the variety of foods appearing in Korean movies and dramas has led to more and more people from around the globe becoming interested in Korean food outside of the usual bibimbap or Korean barbecue. Data from the Korea Tourism Organization on Monday also showed that visitors to South Korea are getting younger thanks to the growing interest in the Korean wave. Among the over 11 million foreign visitors who arrived in South Korea in 2023, 35.6% of them were under the age of 30. More specifically, those aged 21 to 30 accounted for 25.3%, or 2.79 million people, while those aged 20 or younger accounted for 10.3%, or 1.14 million people. The proportion of foreign visitors under the age of 30 stood at 27.6% in 2013, an 8.1 percentage point jump from 10 years earlier. And to cater to the growing number of younger visitors to the country, the Culture Ministry, alongside the Korea Tourism Organization, are looking to bring even more foreign travelers into the country by targeting those interested in esports and K-beauty. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Despite relentless efforts by mediators, chances of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas before the start of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan have been rendered virtually unlikely. Our Shin Se-byuk explains.
The chances of the Israel-Hamas conflict continuing into the holy month of Ramadan without a ceasefire have increased. With Ramadan set to begin on March 11th, the Islamic holy month could potentially see an escalation in the ongoing war. Israel and Hamas engaged in talks last month with mediators from the United States, Qatar, and Egypt regarding a ceasefire during Ramadan. However, these talks reached an impasse in Cairo. Israel was not present at those talks and cited the absence of a list of hostages and detainees to be released by Hamas as the reason for its non-participation. Hamas argued that compiling such a list before a ceasefire was unfeasible, as hostages are scattered throughout the Gaza Strip and are held by various armed factions, not solely by Hamas. The two parties have also not managed to narrow their differences on several crucial issues. Hamas is demanding the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza and the initiation of talks for a permanent ceasefire, whereas Israel insists on the dismantling of Hamas and the rescue of hostages. The international community is particularly concerned about the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem, which for a long time has been a flashpoint for tensions. Traditionally, this site has been reserved for Muslim worship, with Jewish worshippers restricted to the Western Wall in Jerusalem Old City. While non-Muslims are usually allowed to visit, access is restricted during the last 10 days of Ramadan to prevent tensions between Muslims and Jews. These rules, however, have often been disregarded. During Ramadan, Palestinian residents and Arab Israelis have frequently locked the mosque doors, demanding religious freedom. In response, Israeli police have taken actions citing the maintenance of public order. Such actions have led to violent clashes, escalating to armed confrontations between Israel and Palestinian armed groups, including Hamas. As Ramadan is set to commence, tensions are expected to escalate, likely worsening the situation in the region. 신새벽 Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in Hollywood, Los Angeles played host to the world's oldest entertainment awards ceremony, the Oscars, and this year Oppenheimer reigned over the stage. Our Choi Seong has the highlights.
The biggest night of the year in Hollywood has come to a close. The 96th Academy Awards took place on Sunday night local time at the Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles, hosted by the famous American comedian Jimmy Kimmel. The first winner of the event was Da'Vine Joy Randolph for Best Supporting Actress for her role in The Holdovers. Director Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer has won Best Picture. The biopic has also won Oscars for Best Director, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Best Actor for Cillian Murphy, and Best Supporting Actor for Robert Downey Jr., who wins his first Oscar for the category. Oppenheimer was nominated for 13 awards, including Best Picture and Best Supporting Actress for Emily Blunt. The film has already swept other major films awards such as the BAFTAs and Golden Globes. Another noteworthy award is Best Actress. Emma Stone of Poor Things won that award, beating Lily Gladstone of Killers of the Flower Moon. Poor Things, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, is one of the most talked about movies this Oscar season, with 11 nominations, while Lily Gladstone would have become the first Native American to win Best Actress. Meanwhile, Barbie, by director Greta Gerwig, last year's biggest box office hit, has 8 nominations and so far has won the Oscar for Best Original Song. The Best Original Screenplay award goes to Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justin Triet, which beat Past Lives by the Korean-Canadian director Celine Song. Past Lives was also nominated for Best Picture. The Oscars are nominated and voted on by the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences across 20 categories. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
In sports news, badminton champion An Se-young has clinched her second trophy of the season at the French Open. On Sunday, An came from behind to beat Japanese rival Akane Yamaguchi by 2-1 at the women's singles event in Paris. An's win comes 7 weeks after a thigh injury forced her to withdraw from the Indonesia Open. Now, this is her second win of the year since she grabbed gold at the Malaysia Open in January. On the football field, Korea's Heung-min put on display some strategic footwork back on Sunday to seal Tottenham Hotspur's 0-4 win over Aston Villa in the Premier League. Our Yoon covers his performance.
Tottenham Hotspur's team captain Son Heung-min scored a goal and set up 2 others in the Premier League game on Sunday as his team beat Aston Villa in English Premier League. At kickoff, Spurs were 5 points behind Villa, who sat in the coveted 4th place spot and the place in the Champions League that comes with it. But 4 second-half goals cut that gap to 2 points. Spurs broke the deadlock 5 minutes after the restart through James Maddison. And only 3 minutes later, Son set up Brennan Johnson for the second goal of the game. Any chance for Villa's comeback became difficult after John McGinn was shown a straight red card in the 65th minute for a dangerous challenge on Destiny Udogie. Spurs kept the pressure on scoring 2 goals in stoppage time, with Son scoring the game's 3rd goal and setting up the 4th goal from substitute Timo Werner. The win was Spurs' largest victory in the Premier League since January 2023. 31-year-old Son, who was named player of the match, brought his Premier League tally for the season to 14 goals and 8 assists. His goal was also his 159th for Spurs since he signed in 2015, joining club legend Cliff Jones in 5th place on the all-time goal-scoring list. Son is now tied in 4th place for Premier League goals this season. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, Customs and Border Protection authorities here are looking to incorporate artificial intelligence to enhance their inspections at entry ports. Our Chong-Eun-ju has more.
Packages from overseas pass through X-ray security checkpoints. If an object is detected that differs from the cargo information on the import declaration form, a red line appears on the screen immediately. This integrated video search technology utilizing AI is scheduled to be used in the field from 2026 after development is completed by the end of next year.
With the recent boom in e-commerce, there has been a significant increase in items imported through direct shipping. AI assists workers in customs duties, making it easier and more accurate to scan.
AI technology is also utilized in security areas. A CCTV system to be introduced at Incheon International Airport starting this year can selectively track potential criminals among the multitude of travelers in real time. It can also recognize items that individuals possess, thereby preventing smuggling and other crimes.
When travelers designated as potential offenders, based on penalized information, enter the customs entry point, their faces will be recognized and stored on the server.
By utilizing big data consisting of over 70 items such as exporting countries and importers, AI is used to predict high-risk cargo and generate various training material for X-ray interpretation. As cross-border purchases surged to 120 million last year and brought the issue of crime-related imports to the forefront of societal concern, the South Korean government's response using AI technology is also continuing to progress. Chong-Eun-ju, Arirang News.
And staying on the tech front, a team of researchers here are moving closer to making reality the concept of nanorobots traveling around the body to tackle diseased cells. Our Kim Da-mi reports.
A ray of light is shrinking a submarine to a size where it can travel through human blood vessels. Nanorobots have long been an imaginary subject matter for science fiction movies, one that has been close to impossible to achieve.
There has been great interest in the topic, but the research is difficult. Its microscopic size makes it difficult to put in an engine, gears, or sensors.
This bottle of liquid is full of nanorobots developed by a local research team. Under the microscope, there is a round nanorobot, only 200 nanometers or 0.0002 millimeters in size. When the magnetic field is turned off, there is no movement. But with the magnetic field turned on, the nanorobot moves in a circular motion. The robot's engine is iron oxide coated with a golden artificial DNA. With a magnetic force, the iron oxide rotates to generate power, which makes it act like an engine. Surrounding the engine is a porous gold shell coated with DNA. This acts as a rotor, making the robot rotate itself. When the DNA information of the robot detects a matching gene, the engine engages with the rotor and rotates together, acting like a clutch that transmits engine power to a rotor. Which engines the nanorobots will interact with can be set by altering the DNA information coding on the robot engine and rotor.
DNA, as we all know, can be encoded, so it has a certain codable function, and it only responds to specific inputs.
The research team said it has also been successful in activating a target gene by mechanically pulling specific receptors from the nanorobot. The researchers also added that the rotational motion that the nanorobot moves in can have various applications, saying that complex algorithms can be assigned to these nanorobots by coding the DNA on multiple robots. This is expected to be applicable in administering medication or other such treatment methods. The goal for the research team is to make this nanorobot an autonomous robot that can make itself to a designated target point in the body on its own. 김다미, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In Indonesia, floods and landslides in the country's West Sumatra province have killed at least 19, while 7 are still missing. Indonesia's rescue agency reported on Sunday that some 80,000 people in the Pesisir Selatan district of West Sumatra have been evacuated to temporary government shelters, while 150 rescuers have been drafted in for additional support. The head of the local search and rescue agency said most severe damage was seen in the southern coastal area. The area affected has seen several days of torrential rain. In India, exiled Tibetans residing in the country took to the streets on Sunday to protest against Chinese occupancy of their homeland. Large crowds of protesters gathered in New Delhi and in the northern town of Dharamsala to commemorate National Tibetan Uprising Day on March 10th. Protesters were seen marching with flags, banners and slogans with raised voices against the Chinese oppression. One protester said they were demonstrating in India because Tibetans in Tibet cannot, while another dragged a poster of Chinese President Xi Jinping through the streets tied to his vehicle. This year also marks 65 years since the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, was exiled from Tibet. China has ruled Tibet since its army invaded the region in 1950. In Lebanon, a 4-month-old lion cub was found and taken into care by an animal charity in its capital Beirut on Saturday. The baby lion's owner had reported it lost or stolen earlier in the week. However, a post on social media showed a man with a chained lion cub, prompting urgent action from police and animal rights activists. Authorities handed the 4-month-old cub to the animal rights group Animals Lebanon, which will care for it before securing a sanctuary for the animal. Since the adoption of an animal protection law in 2017, keeping wild animals in captivity is a criminal act in Lebanon. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. After some picture-perfect weather on Sunday afternoon, the new week is kicking off under cloudy conditions with rain. Rain starts this afternoon from Jeju and Jeollado provinces, gradually spreading to the rest of the southern regions as the day goes on. Then it will rain in central regions late tonight and will continue nationwide through Tuesday. Further south, we'll receive heavier rainfall with snow in the forecast for mountainous regions in Gangwon province. Meanwhile, central parts of the country will see just spotty rain. But spring is still well underway with wide temperature swings between lows and highs. Those in Gyeongju could have gaps of more than 15 degrees Celsius today, so please take good care of yourself. Meanwhile, Seoul gets up to 11 degrees, Gwangju, Daegu topping out at 13 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Then decent air quality nationwide today. This round of wet weather will bring spring warmth to the country. Highs will reach the mid-teens as the week goes on under brighter skies. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. And today we delve into a scheduled summit for democracy to be hosted by Seoul next week. See you back in a few minutes.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
South Korea is poised to play host to the third Summit for Democracy, aimed at strengthening solidarity among nations with shared values, starting next week. So what is on the agenda this year? What is the significance of South Korea's proactive stance to the summit? And what are pundits proposing to make the summit a permanent forum for democracies? Hope your work week is off to a good start. You're watching Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today, we touch upon an upcoming forum on democracy to be hosted by South Korea starting next Monday until next Wednesday. For this, I have Professor Min Jung-hoon from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy here in the studio. Professor Min, welcome back.
My pleasure always.
I also have Professor Han Shattle from Yonsei University. Professor Shattle, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Sun-hee. Nice to see you.
Right. Professor Min, we'll start with you. Let's begin with some background information about the Summit for Democracy, including, of course, its purpose and the outcome of the previous two meetings, I believe.
Yes, the Summit for Democracy is a virtual meeting among democratic countries, and it was initiated by the Biden administration of the United States. And it is known that the goals of the summit meeting is to renew democracy at home and confront autocracies abroad. And the first summit was held in December 2021. And the three themes of the summit include defending democracy against authoritarianism, addressing and fighting corruption, and advancing respect for human rights. And the 111 countries joined the first meeting. But the first meeting also became controversial because contradictory to its themes, multiple undemocratic or the authoritarian regimes like Iraq and Pakistan joined the meeting, and it was criticized. And some argued that the Biden administration strategically invited such undemocratic countries to mobilize them for checking the rise of China and other authoritarian regimes. And the second summit was held in March 2023, and it was co-hosted by the U.S., South Korea, Costa Rica, Zambia, and Netherlands. And in the meeting, the participating countries organized actions to address emerging threats or challenges to democracy. And as you saw from the briefing, the third meeting will be hosted by South Korea, and it will be held on March 18th through 20th. And the main theme of the meeting is known as democracy for future generations. And as you know, South Korea is pursuing global pivotal state and expresses value diplomacy to be a responsible state stakeholder in the global community. So hosting the summit would contribute South Korea to enhancing its international standing as a trustworthy, responsible, advanced democracy.
Right, and expanding perhaps on what Professor Min has just said, Professor Shattle, what is the significance of the Yoon administration's proactive stance to this particular forum, if I may?
Well, Sunny, as Professor Min just said, when President Yoon came into office, the phrase global pivotal state became a key buzzword for this government, and it left a lot of us in political science wondering just exactly what would be meant by that, how the Yoon administration would go about trying to put some meat on the bones of that statement. And I think hosting a global summit on democracy is certainly one way that they can do that. Keep in mind also that President Yoon won the election here in March of 2022, just a few days after Russia invaded Ukraine. And it's possible that and it was a narrow victory for President Yoon as well. And it's possible that what had the effect of swinging the election in his favor was concern in this country about the need for South Korea to stand shoulder to shoulder with democracies around the world. And of course, this coincided with the Biden administration in the United States also trying to build together a stronger coalition of not only allies, but fellow democratic countries around the world. So for President Yoon and the government to stand shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. and with other democratic nation states is actually a way of saying, you know, here's Korea to do its part alongside the rest of the world's democracies. Now, of course, it invites a lot of critical scrutiny on the effectiveness of democracy in any country that's going to host a summit for democracy, including this one. So that can lead to some interesting conversation today as well.
Right, and I will expand on that later on then. Professor Min, there are pundits who believe that the platform has been made, but it needs to take on a greater, or play a greater significant role amid the current climate of geopolitical tensions. That being said, what would you suggest to ensure that this particular summit becomes more than just another talk shop for global leaders?
Well, basically, I think that if the summit meeting want to get a global significance, it needs to establish tangible agendas that member states can be interested together, like the economic and trade issues in the APEC summit meeting. But this summit for democracy, includes over 110 countries, and they have different political, economic, and cultural backgrounds. And academically speaking, the term democracy could have various definitions and not easy to clarify and have a consensus about how to defend the democracy against authoritarianism and how to fight against corruption and how to protect and improve human rights. For example, think about the supposed situation where regarding human rights, there are some countries in the summit who got some kind of human rights violations in the country. And then how can the participating countries in the summit reach an agreement in the summit to criticize human rights violation and protect human rights in the countries? And most countries in the summit also have some diplomatic and economic connections with China, Russia, and the Middle East countries. And I don't think that in the summit they would be able to criticize the undemocratic countries for any reason, like political oppression, corruption, and human rights violations in the countries. So these examples show that the Summit for Democracy could be a kind of political and diplomatic symbolic meeting among democratic countries, or more precisely, like-minded countries. Of course, they could talk about ODA and projects that the members of developed countries could offer for members of developing countries in the summit. In addition, it should be noted that the summit meeting was initiated by Biden administration, which want to utilize democratic values and principles like freedom, rule of law, and human rights to mobilize its allies and partners in order to maintain its leadership in the global community. So, simply speaking, as one of the developed democracies in the summit, South Korea can take more active roles and responsibilities just in helping developing countries in the summit.
Right, and staying with the same question, Professor Shuttle, what are some ways to make this particular platform more permanent?
Well, for starters, as we've been discussing, so far the summit has been hosted and held by individual countries. So the baton has been passed, at least for this year, say, from the U.S., which had organized it with several partners, to South Korea, which is taking the lead. It's possible that the next best move for the summit, for it to evolve further, would be to set up a permanent secretariat. There are a couple of different models that could follow. It could be a secretariat that would rotate from country to country, and participating countries could line up maybe in 5-year intervals, taking turns and rotating as host. Another model would be to have a secretariat that would be independent of the individual countries in question. South Korea does host several UN-related organizations already, so Korea could be a candidate location, I think, for a permanent secretariat, although there are a lot of other countries that could be candidates as well, especially since you want, I think anyway, I'm assuming that a group of countries around the world can have a shared understanding of what counts for democracy and substantively how to work to advance those kinds of goals, and that's another long conversation. But assuming that enough countries think this is worth continuing, it is important for the summit to have a kind of structure to it and a permanent body that will allow it to outlast the presidents and prime ministers of any individual nation state. So a secretariat is one step, and this is probably the right time to start looking into that and pursuing it. I know some organizations such as Freedom House have been advancing that. A couple of other steps that have been recommended as well. One would be for the countries participating to be asked to make specific commitments at how they are going to work to strengthen democracies from within. Basically, the idea that every country coming, and to avoid hypocrisy or minimize charges that here you are claiming to be a great democracy, but what about all the issues you have at home? What would individual countries do to try to strengthen and sustain democracy within their own spaces first, and then have a way for those countries to be accountable to delivering on those commitments. And then further, there's, democracy is a lot more than just government officials and elected representatives talking to each other. What makes a democracy ultimately, even in an age when most of the government will operate by representation, ultimately it's also participation by the people. And strong civil society organizations, strong citizens groups that are operating independently of the marketplace, independently of the state, and create this so-called third space for everyday people to actually have their voices projected into what comes out of government down the road. So there have been a lot of efforts by the organizers of the summit to bring in civil society representatives, both virtually and maybe this year in person. But there's a lot more that can be done in that regard. And I think that would also have a strengthening effect on the summit in the years to come.
Right, hopefully. Upon the birth of the Summit for Democracy, Professor Min, quite a number of people spoke about how global democracy was at threat. Now, speaking within your capacity as a scholar, do you believe global democracy is under tangible threat as we speak?
Yes, personally, I think that global democracy is declining nowadays. As you know, the world has experienced COVID-19, Ukraine war, and Israel-Hamas war. And few expected that we could see the situation where conventional wars could break out in the 21st century, 2020. It's a shocking news we got. And as a result of unexpected, irrational incidents, skepticism about democracy is growing around the world. And people want to have strong leaders who would restore law and order in their territory and secure their own interests against other countries in the global community. And we can find such a trend from public opinion polls. Recently, Pew Research Center survey showed that 59% of respondents answered that they are not satisfied with the way democracy works. And in addition, the percentage of the respondents who answered that the current representative democratic system is very good, the percentage is decreased by 5 to 10% in even democratic countries like UK, Germany, Japan, Italy, and South Korea compared to 2017. Meanwhile, the percentage of respondents who answered that I prefer a government system that their strong leader makes decisions without being checked by Congress or courts, that percentage increases significantly compared to 2017. Surprisingly, 12% increase in South Korea, 10% increase in Germany, and another 12% increase in India. And as you know, about 40 countries are supposed to hold the presidential and congressional elections this year. So I wonder if and how much such changes in the voter perception about democracy could affect the results of the upcoming elections around the world. I'm really worried about that.
That really is the big question right now. Professor Shuttle, do you, regardless of all the difficulties we face at the moment, do you suppose the presence of such platforms like the Summit for Democracy is perhaps a step in the right direction to better promoting democratic principles?
Oh, absolutely. You know, the more that we bring people together to reaffirm commitments to democracy, but also try to think critically about how democracy can be improved and what kinds of innovations we can make to take democracy, we could say, to a higher level of evolution. It's very, very important. So, you know, this endeavor is certainly worth continuing. One area that I would highlight personally is a kind of next frontier, so to speak, for thinking about further democratic innovations. There's been a lot of work in my field in political science on the idea of deliberative democracy, you know, working between representation and participation. Let's face it, most everyday people, you know, go about, live their lives in large societies and generally don't get that involved in political life, except for when it comes time to vote. Or maybe they're involved in a community group in their neighborhood, but they're not, you know, actively engaged in, say, a major political issue, say on the environment or say on poverty or workers' rights. I mean, people will get drawn into these big issues depending on what kind of work they do, but day to day there's not a lot of involvement. So one idea that political theorists have really been working on is to create more citizens' assemblies. For instance, in the US, we could easily, well, maybe not easily, but we could feasibly set up a citizens' assembly that could act as a kind of third chamber in the US Congress. Or we could do the same in Korea. Korea has a one-chamber National Assembly. There are ways in which the basis of representation could be worked out through random selection, very similar to public opinion polling, where you could take a randomly selected group of citizens that would be a good representation of the general public in Korea, people that would be willing to serve, not by getting elected, but by being selected, almost like jury duty. And then having these selected representatives, once they're chosen, you know, participate. And it gives the general public another way of getting involved, other than just having the usual electoral politics. And at times, even in Korea, there have been a couple of citizens' assemblies that have taken up key issues. One of them had to do with the siting of a nuclear power plant on the East Coast. So in Northern Europe, this has been growing as a trend. In Australia, it's been growing. They're not perfect. There was even a global citizens' assembly on climate issues. It's not well known, that panel, but it was an offshoot of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So I think if there were more space at the Summit for Democracy to take ideas like citizens' assemblies and think more about how they could be operationalized favorably. What can we do to take the bugs out of citizens' assemblies that have existed so far and try to bring that further in to democratic processes? And could strengthening citizens' assemblies possibly serve as a way in which more people, especially younger people, could express more confidence down the road in democracies? Because as Professor Min pointed out, a lot of the public opinion polling is quite grim, suggesting that younger people are losing confidence in democracy. So in a way, we have a choice. We either have to keep hobbling along as we are, or risk erosion of democracy, or think about innovation. And I think the summit's function should be to push the innovation side.
For more perhaps civil engagement then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Professor Min, domestically then, what are South Korea's priorities to perhaps further promote its democracy?
Well, we can see the various ways of promoting democracy at home. And one of the big advantages that South Korean society has got is the well-activated civil society. And we got the pretty good tradition of activating civil society, and we got the pretty good political, the history experience in terms of the taking the power back from the dictators to the hands of the mass or the public. So the South Korea has got the pretty good history of the civil society, and it's about time to activate the civil society's roles in terms of dealing with the everyday political problems, like what the East Coast, the nuclear power plant problems and other things, and activating that kind of the grassroots to the democratic tradition could be one of the ways that promote the democracy in South Korea. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, to date, we got the pretty tough the trend around the world. Strongmen dominate the the political arena throughout the world. So it's not easy to overcome such kind of the environment. But anyway, it's about time to a little bit more seriously talk about how we reactivate the civil society in terms of promoting the democracy around the world, and including South Korea.
Right, indeed. Professor Shuttle, speaking as a foreign scholar here in South Korea, what is your perhaps general assessment of South Korea's own democracy?
Well, let me say, first of all, Sunny, that every democracy has difficulties. No democracy in the history of the world has ever been perfect. You know, ancient Athens had slavery. The U.S. in its early years had slavery. You know, students in the U.S. learn about the Civil War. I'm sure students learn about it here too. And the U.S. is still struggling with issues of racial justice and also struggling for full inclusion. I mean, the history of American citizenship in many ways is a struggle, you know, for 200 years of groups that were excluded from the original political system, women who couldn't vote, African Americans that were excluded, other ethnic minorities that were excluded, and continuing to fight for that inclusion. So Korea, of course, has its struggles as well. One area of concern here, I think, currently is press freedom and openness to the media. Even though there's so many media outlets here, and generally that's a sign of a healthy democracy, there's also concern about persistent government interference on the management, the administration of news organizations, especially broadcasters. So that's one area of concern. There have been raids on the homes and the offices of journalists at times critical of the present government, so that's another point of concern. Defamation lawsuits are fairly easy to file in Korea. In the U.S., say, the First Amendment, which gives journalists a lot of space to report critically on public officials. Most countries don't have provisions quite that airtight, so that's been an issue in Korea as well. Globally, for press freedom, South Korea ranked 47th in 2023 on the list kept by the international organization Reporters Without Borders. That's not terrible. You know, it's out of 200 countries, so it puts South Korea still in the top 25% or so. But, you know, this country often aims to be in the top 10 or the top 10% for the league table. So that's definitely a growth area that the government should be aware of and should give, you know, have enough confidence in the society to have the space to air coverage critically. And there's also a lot of concern, I think, in this country over the rights of women, the rights of LGBT minorities, the rights of refugees and migrants. And one thing I really like, you asked as an international resident here in Korea, one thing I've always liked about being in Seoul is on any given day you can be walking down near Gwanghwamun and see protesters, often protesters on different sides of the political spectrum out expressing their voices. We think back to the candlelight revolutions in 2016 and the peaceful transfer of power that emerged at that point after a serious presidential scandal. So the rule of law here got through that crisis in 2016, and I think that was actually a very important moment where after at that point South Korea had been fully democratic, we could say, for about a generation, and that was a real test, and the country passed that test. So that is very important, but there are always steps that can be taken to try to strengthen the rule of law and human rights and full inclusion of citizens here.
Right, indeed, of course. Professor Shuttle, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, and Professor Min, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.